Welcome back to the Super Data Science Podcast, everybody. Super excited to have you back here on the show. And today we've got a very special guest calling in from San Jose, Rama Akkiraju. How are you going, Rama?
I'm doing very well, Kirill. Thanks very much for having me on your show.
Yeah, very excited to have you on the show. And congrats on the puppy, as you shared with me before the podcast. That's so cool. 4 months old.
Yes, 4 months old, keeping us on our toes.
Yeah. How many
He's a
children do you
pandemic
have?
puppy,
Pandemic puppy. How many children do you have?
I have one.
One child? And so what made you decide to get a puppy as well?
Well, my daughter is the one who really pushed us to get one. So.
And it's a Shih Tzu, right?
Yeah, it's a Shih Tzu. It's really adorable.
Okay, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. What's the name?
His name is Scout.
Scout. Very cool. Hope Scout's having fun, and it's good that you're able to take him for walks even during the pandemic.
Yeah, he'll get cooped up otherwise.
Yeah, crazy.
And we get cooped up too.
Yeah. Are things getting better with the pandemic? Like with the vaccine has been announced. Is it like looking hopeful in the United States?
Well, to the contrary, the cases are rising and things are getting worse, and the second wave is going on right now. So, in fact, there are more, cautions and suggested curfews and lockdowns in many places all across the country. So we just have to ride it through, the second wave, and hope for the vaccines to be more generally available and get vaccinated. And hopefully also there are no major side effects with those vaccines. So we'll see. It's going to take a while.
Yeah, definitely. Well, as you say, we can only wait and see. There's a lot of smart people figuring this out all around the world. So it's good.
Yeah, thanks to all the pharmaceutical researchers who are working around the clock to find vaccines for it, right?
Absolutely. A lot of data science involved as well. I spoke with one of the data scientists on this podcast who is in charge of the data pipeline for the COVID consortium project. And it's very interesting how like the skills we talk about and the skills like we apply in business normally can be used in crisis situations like this one.
Yeah. I totally see that, and I understand. There is a lot of data science in there, and a lot of disciplined processes, disciplined way of collecting data, cataloging, testing, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of data and data science, you've been at IBM for this is a
pretty much all my career.
Number of years. 23 years at IBM. That is like congratulations! What an incredible career, and you've grown through the different positions there. How's your experience been? And more like very interesting for me is you were at IBM before data science was a thing, and then you are at IBM after data science. Like 2010, 2012, when data science really like became the thing, like the big thing. What's changed in the world or in your work before and after? Do you see like a big difference, or was it very gradual and smooth?
Well, analytics were always there, right? Whether it was doing mathematical modeling or algorithms for solving problems. Manufacturing, supply chain had a lot of analytical algorithms, especially operations research was being applied quite a bit to optimize manufacturing and supply chain processes. So they were always there, and there was a lot of mathematical modeling and all, AI, iterative refinement algorithms, A-star search type of algorithms, and all of those kind of things. I think what has changed now is that our ability to tap into unstructured data, right? Because we now have, with the advent of the cloud compute and the advancements in machine learning algorithms, it makes it possible for us to do natural language processing at scale because we have enough compute now and the algorithms are efficient enough. So suddenly what has the world of unstructured data analysis opened up. And that is the new opportunity with this whole AI and data science, right? It was there, data mining. We were looking at the clicks, web clicks, and all that when e-commerce and internet boom has happened. But that was all kind of very structured data, right? Still, the number of clicks, what they bought, what they purchased, and the patterns around it, and there was a lot of data mining and still a lot of analytics. But now we can tap into all the enterprise documents. We can tap into social media conversations. We can tap into large volumes of healthcare journals and articles and doctors' notes and legal notes and all kinds of stuff, and we can tap into the insights that data gives. And when you combine that with the previous generations, and of course even today's generations continuing ability to do data analysis on structured data, you now have more deeper, richer insights. And that's the opportunity that I see. And that is what I have seen back when I was working on AI, iterative refinement algorithms, and operations research type of things for manufacturing and supply chain, to through the waves of e-commerce and the analytics around e-commerce, customer CRM analysis, now to tapping into unstructured data. And there was a landmark, I would say, in this whole thing as to what opened up the floodgate, and that was the Jeopardy, the game of Jeopardy that IBM had hosted, right? In which it had shown that, of course, it's a great combination of compute and analyzing natural language data to answer or to pose questions for answers. But that is the one that's kind of a landmark moment, I would say, in this journey that suddenly kind of opened things up for everybody. Before that, I would say, yes, I mean, Google search and, as in general, search has been a huge wave, and that continues to be so in solving our problems. And that kind of builds the bridge. But to bring it to, I would say, to specific use cases and enterprises beyond search, I would say that Jeopardy was kind of the landmark moment.
This is where IBM Watson beat human players at the game of Jeopardy.
The game of Jeopardy, right? Yeah. Which is answer question game.
Yeah, famous moment. It was a while ago, right? What year was it? Do you remember?
2000. I don't want to.
Let's look it up.
Wrong. 2012 or 2013, something like that, I think.
20. Looks like 2011 or I think it's like, or 2013. You're right. It's not clear, but a long time ago, right? Almost 10 years ago, which is
10 years ago now.
Which is very interesting. And also, in addition to that, I heard of a case when somebody, like I think a woman had cancer and no doctor was able to diagnose her what kind of cancer she had, and that same IBM Watson that won the game of Jeopardy by going through all this unstructured data and all these reports, which would be very hard for any one human to know at the same time, like, right, this disparate knowledge around the world about different types of cancer and different symptoms. IBM Watson was able to diagnose this lady with exactly the type of cancer that she had, which was a rare type of cancer. And from there, that made it possible to decide what was the correct treatment. And so that was like even more mind-blowing for me, because Jeopardy is a game which is a big accomplishment. It's like a big PR accomplishment, but here it's actually helping somebody with their healthcare. And as far as I understand, you worked on the IBM Watson project as well. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so that's the healthcare part of IBM's Watson. That was one of the first, I would say, attempts at taking what was Jeopardy technology to really apply it to an enterprise use case. And we as IBM have learned interesting lessons from that episode, because there was a lot of expectations, And the reality of AI is, is somewhere else. There were some very successful outcomes, and there were some from which we learned significant lessons. That it takes hard work, it takes a lot of right kind of data, and it takes setting right expectations with our customers about the capability of these AI models on day one versus what it takes in terms of the life cycle management of these models and all that. So yeah, it's the success stories, especially when they positively impact humans' lives, of course, is something to celebrate. So we're very happy about that. So what the work that I did in Watson is around modeling people. So this is understanding people's various aspects, such as their personality traits, their communication tones, their emotions, sentiments, so that we can personalize engagements for people, be it in chatbots when you are, say, interacting, when a human is interacting with a chatbot, how can those conversations be personalized? Or in social media monitoring type of scenarios where you would like to scan social media content and understand what are people saying about different products, what are their sentiments and those sort of things. Or in public relations type of scenarios where you want to understand when a CEO of a company or a CFO is putting out statements, can those be analyzed to feel one way or the other about what they are saying about the company and what might be the sentiment towards the where the company is headed next and those sort of things. And in general about communications about between people or between chatbots and humans, what are the communication tones? Are they frustrated at this point in time? Are they happy with the way the call is going? Is human intervention needed at this point, given how the call is going and those sort of things? So all things related to these are all some of the use cases for the work that we had done. But it's all about understanding people, and we call that area people insights. Excuse me. In the area of human computer interaction, it's called user modeling, basically. So that's the area that I worked on in Watson. So what you will see on Watson platform are services such as personality insights, which detects people's personality traits, and sentiment analysis, emotion analysis, and communication tone analysis called Tone Analyzer. So these are the four services, AI-based services that my team and we have worked on while I was at Watson.
Wow, that's very interesting. I hope you're enjoying this episode. We'll get back to it after this quick break. And the Confident Data Skills Edition 2 is out. This is the second edition of the book I published in 2018. Some time has passed since then. A lot of things have changed in the space of artificial intelligence and data science. If you're not familiar with the book, then it helps develop an understanding of all of the main data science algorithms and the data science process on an intuitive level. So no code, no complex mathematics, just intuitive explanations of the algorithms and useful practical examples and case studies. This book will be extremely helpful for you if you're starting out or if you're looking to cement in that intuitive feeling for the algorithms as you progress through your career. Specifically, you will learn about decision trees, random forests, k-nearest neighbors, naive Bayes, logistic regression, k-means clustering, hierarchical clustering, reinforcement learning, upper confidence bound, and Thompson sampling. And in this second edition, I also added robotic process automation, computer vision, natural language processing, reinforcement learning and deep learning, and neural networks. Plus, of course, you will learn extremely valuable skills for your career, such as ethics and AI, presentation skills, data science interview tips, and much more. So if you want to get a grip and really cement in your intuitive understanding of this field, then this is the book for you. And you can get it on Amazon already today. It's called Confident Data Skills Edition 2, and it's a purple book. So enjoy, and let's get back to the podcast. It's actually very cool to hear, because I've seen this Watson platform, and I've actually used it as a case study in one of my presentations about AI and natural language processing. So
Oh, really?
I'm
Which
very,
service was that?
I just talked about AI Watson platform and how there was an example of a company. I think it was like, I might be mistaken. Like some AutoCAD, the creators of AutoCAD, or some company where the designers are using their software, and they had like, thousands, tens of thousands of support queries per day that they needed to address, and then they used the IBM Watson platform to automate that, and they were able to bring the average response time from like several days to under 5 minutes, and process many more queries and so on. So like you have a case study of that on the website, and I was very inspired by that, so I used that in one of my presentations. But it's really cool to see that you need to be talking with the creator or with one of the people that was working on these on the IBM Watson platform.
Yeah, as I said, there are many capabilities, many services in the Watson platform.
Mm-hmm.
There is the Watson Assistant, which is the chatbot service. There is the Watson Discovery, which allows you to ingest enterprise content and get insights from it. And then there is what is called natural language understanding suite of services, which include extraction of entities in a given text document, extraction of sentiments, emotions,
Mm-hmm.
concepts, and those sort of things. And then there is the speech to text, text to speech, and then there is the personality insights and such. And as I said, all of these services constitute Watson platform. And the ones that I have personally worked on are the ones that I just mentioned, like the personality insights, tone
Mm-hmm.
analyzer, sentiment, and emotions.
Okay, gotcha. So it's quite a big platform, and I think I got the example somewhere here. No, I don't have the example here. Anyway, it's very interesting, and so it's basically any company can come and start using the IBM Watson platform to their benefit, right? So it's quite a fast process to get up to speed. Is that right?
Yeah, so the idea there is that AI services are a set of building block services that that are available to everybody, that you can use to build whatever business application you want to build, right? It could be a chatbot application. It could be that you want to build a specific, scenario where you are applying speech to text in, translating some audio documents into text documents, right? So different kinds of scenarios. Depending on your scenario, you can bring in these different foundational services, assemble them, and put your application together and deploy it. There are, in addition to what are offered on Watson platform, you can do many more things with AI, of course, right? I mean, you can infuse AI into IT operations management, for example. You can infuse AI into security management. You can infuse AI into financial services related use cases and so on. So it could be applied to many different types. What we had built in Watson platform was the foundational set of services. On top of it, depending on the industry, depending on the use case, there could be more specific AI-based solutions that can be built, either by clients themselves, by leveraging some of the foundational services, or by vendors. And in some cases, IBM itself is building those higher level AI-infused solutions and applications so that clients in those industries, those use cases, don't have to do it themselves. So for example, let's take IT management. IT management has many aspects, right? It could be about managing the outages and incidents, right? When a system becomes unresponsive or excess traffic and it needs to be scaled up and any number of those things. Or it could be the software development process optimization itself, where code is written, but there are some vulnerabilities in the code, security vulnerabilities, and you could apply AI to detect those and give you early signals about where the risks are, and give you suggestions on how to improve code so that things don't get bad. Similarly, in the other parts of software development lifecycle, you can look at the deployments of applications and say, hey, this deployment is highly risky because it's got these configuration changes which have been noted to be highly problematic. When you deploy these kind of changes in the past, whenever you did that, major outages occurred, right? So there are different kinds of predictions you can do. And this is one example in IT domain. There are others in security domain, in financial services domain, of course, in healthcare domain, and so on. So there are the foundational services for basic understanding of the text, images, voice, in those type of things, which form the foundations for processing all this enterprise data. And then on top of it, you have the actual problems to solve for which you would build your own models. And underneath, you may use any of these building block services depending on the kind of data, right? If you're working with images, or if you're working with audio or unstructured text.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. It sounds useful when it's created. But if, for example, I'm manager or business owner or entrepreneur listening to this, I might be like confused, or it might be a bit like overwhelming. Okay, how do I do this? Okay, there's this IBM Watson platform. How do I go there? How do I connect to it? Do I need API? Do I need this and that? So it's quite like a lot of, I think it feels like there's a barrier to start using it. So the question I had is, what kind of skills does an organization need to have on board in order to be able to interact with this IBM Watson platform? And I think this question will be useful not just to managers and executives who might want to use something like the IBM Watson platform, but also to data scientists who are listening, who it will be guidance in order to, okay, what skills do I need to add to my portfolio to be that enabler for enterprises in order to interact with these kind of like plug and play ready-made AI solutions out there?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I would say, actually, let's not make it very specific to Watson platform alone.
Mm-hmm.
In general, how do you consume AI services, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is the question at heart, because there is nothing that is specific to Watson services that is either extremely better or worse, because it's really everybody out there packages them, every AI service, as a containerized piece of software that is deployed in Kubernetes, made available either as a software as a service, SaaS service, or if clients prefer it to be on-prem, deploy it on-prem, right? It's still packaged and containerized and all that. So that part of really microservice-based architecture and accessing APIs either as SaaS or on-prem is the same across the board in the industry. Every vendor follows the same approach. Every company who is building these AI services and delivering them to their customers uses the same approach. So there is nothing that's significantly better or worse that is specific to Watson there. What is really at the heart of the question that you asked is, what does it take to consume an AI model and derive value out of it? Would you agree? Is that at the core of your question?
Yes.
Okay. So then let me state it in the following way. There are actually many considerations. First one is, whoever is building it have to have clarity of purpose, right? Why are they building this AI model? Whose problem is it solving? And when I build it, do I make sure that this model is, first of all, is this model that is pre-trained, or does it need to be trained with the data that client provides in their environment, right? If it is a pre-trained model where, say, for example, speech-to-text model, in order to provide an English speech-to-text model, the builder of the speech-to-text model has to train it with thousands of hours, at least 1,000, ideally 2,000 or so hours of audio data with various accents for people speaking in English from various accents, different parts of the geography, and so on, for it to be robust. But then I say clarity of purpose because let's say that this speech to text system is going to be deployed in a drive-through fast food ordering retail company. Okay, in that setting, people who are ordering food via drive-through setup are not going to use long sentences with a lot of grammar in it and all that. It's very specific. A menu is given, they're ordering specific items. There's a lot of background noise, maybe dog barking in the back of the car or children crying in the back of the car, and ambient noise in the environment. The speech to text model has to really do well for that use case, right? So when I say clarity of purpose, of course you have to have a speech to text model that is good in understanding general English terms, but it's more important in that case for it to be specific and useful in that context, that it understands that menu, it understands how people speak with those background noises and all that, right? So when you build a model for that purpose, the purpose has to be clear for a data scientist, so that they can train it with the right kind of data and make sure that when it is deployed in that particular setting, that when somebody is ordering burgers, fries, and milkshakes and this and that, it understands that terminology, right? So that's one thing. I'm just giving that as an example, but that applies just the same to take it to healthcare domain, take it to contract understanding domain, and there are specific terms and specific things that are applicable to specific industries and domains. So having a clarity of that is super important, and that's what first of all makes the model more usable and relevant. Okay, that's first thing. And if it's pre-trained, if it is pre-trainable, like in the case of speech to text, it might be pre-trainable, because you say, okay, it's going to be for a fast food center, and these are the typical kind of things that they make in the menu and so on. So clarity of purpose. Second time, now we come to the client who's buying that AI model, let's say. Let's say this fast food company is purchasing this AI model that is able to understand the spoken speech of customers who are ordering this fast food, and they're deploying it in their restaurants, in their fast food centers. They now need to have clarity on how long is it going to take for this AI model to be reliable enough for them to deploy it more broadly across all their fast food centers, right? Initially they'll do a POC, right? Anybody who wants to try it out, test it out, I mean, you don't deploy a new AI model system just like that, right? So they'll do a POC, so the proof of concept, maybe 3 months or 6 months, or maybe on 10, 20 fast food centers. Then you kind of understand where the system is good at in recognizing the orders and where it's making mistakes, and and give feedback to the system. And part of that feedback is you say, this prediction, or you transcribed this order to be fries when it was not fries. When they said burger, you actually mistook it to be something else, and those sort of things, right? So you give feedback to the system. The system then takes that, retrains the models, and retrains from the new accents that it is seeing and all that, and improves its model. Over a period of, say, maybe after 3-4 months of POC time with all this feedback going and all that, system now starts to get fine-tuned very well to that specific accent, specific background noises, and the feedback with the feedback given. That's the time to value, right? So companies who are consuming this have to be prepared. I'm not saying that every AI model needs to go through that 3 to 6 months. I'm just giving that one example so we can talk it through. You with me?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is the time to value. So they need to understand. In some cases, it may be out of the box. It may just work just fine, and it may be usable just with some training from their own environment. But in some cases, it could be this. So understanding what it takes, what is the time it takes for this AI model to start delivering value for me, at the level of accuracy that I desire, right? Even if you deploy it, you may still get it wrong, because even humans who are taking orders sometimes mix up things, right? Because when there is too much noise in the background and all that, it's hard. And sometimes, you get two orders of rice, or sometimes you get your burger is missing, right? That happens. So you can't expect an AI system to be perfect all the time. So, but there's some level of accuracy requirement that you may set, saying at least 90% of the time, 95% of the time, it has to be good. Is that acceptable, or does it have to be 97%? Right? 3 orders in 100 orders are going to get bad. Customers are going to be unhappy. Is that something that you really are comfortable with or not? Right? Those are the decisions that the consumers of the AI model have to make, because it's not guaranteed to be perfect. So that's the time to value, and also the accuracy aspect. Then there is the data, which is how much data is needed for this AI model or solution to train and to get to value, right? And how many audio samples from my customers who are giving orders should I provide to the system as part of the initial training? And where do I put this data? Do you have to hire those people who are willing to give those orders in a setup type of a setup, right? And you have to acquire that data legally. In some cases, the companies may have all the data that they need. It may just be a matter of cleaning it. I wouldn't say it lightly, actually. Cleaning, organizing, and analyzing data is a huge part of getting data ready for AI. And we call at IBM this actually as an AI ladder. That, right? You first collect data, then you cleanse it, you organize it, then you analyze it, and that's when you're ready to actually use that data to do AI. Anyway, so all of these things around data, where does the data reside? How long does it take to aggregate or assemble it? Who owns that data? What is the governance and compliance of that data? What is the lineage of this data? Do we need to label it? And in many cases, in this particular example of speech to text one that I'm carrying through, you may have to label it, right? I mean, customers are giving orders with a lot of background noise, and you transcribe it. Set humans to transcribe it for you, and you feed that as the additional training data to the pre-built speech to text system, and so on. So that's the data part. So I talked about clarity of purpose first from the builder side. Then I talked about consumers of the AI models having clarity on the time to value, right? How long does it take? And then the data part of it. How much data do I need to give it in order for it to deliver value to me? Then there is the skills part of it, right? Are data scientists needed to manage the life cycle of these AI models? When I say life cycle, what do I mean? I mean, these users have to give feedback, right? I said, it could be making mistakes. You have to give it feedback for it to be learning from the mistakes that it's making. Does that have to happen like forever? Would somebody have to keep on teaching it? Frankly speaking, we don't know, because really, how many AI systems are out there that have been in production for multiple months or years and have reached a level of um, accuracy that's comfortable, that's acceptable to the users, and it has plateaued in its learning, that it's not learning anymore. It does make mistakes occasionally, but it's not learning anymore. Do we have examples of that? Maybe not. The thing is that I say that because it's fairly new. Many companies are still exploring, experimenting with it. In some industries, things have progressed more than in others. In healthcare domains, for example, many of the AI systems that special purpose companies or IBM or others have built are in production and have been through multiple generations and such. So maybe in some domains, it has reached that level of maturity where it has gone through those multiple iterations of improvements and has reached a level that is stable. But in many other cases, it's in early days. So do users have to give feedback all the time, forever? Not clear, right? I mean, initially you definitely have to give it feedback until it gets to a point, but after that, it may occasionally still make mistakes, especially when it starts to see data that it hasn't seen in its training. It may make mistakes. So in such cases, doing very disciplined error analysis and knowing where it's making mistakes and giving it feedback would be helpful. So what I'm saying is that the skills that are required to give as a subject matter expert giving feedback, and the skills that are required to ensure that you are doing error analysis on these models and are in a disciplined way looking at where it's making mistakes. There may be tools and reporting and all that around AI models for doing all of these things, but somebody has to look at it and steer it in certain direction. And again, automation tools and AI platforms are offering more and more of these things. Still, some amount of skills are required. So companies who are consuming it would have to know um, some amount of AI and how it AI terms, at least, what is accuracy, what is precision, what is recall, what are the trade-offs, how to give feedback, and how is a new model built, how to deploy the new model, and all of those things. So skills is an important factor. So are new roles needed in the organization, company? What training is required to, for existing people in their current roles to get them to manage these AI models in production? These are all things that companies have to think about. And I'll say two more things. I know in this long-winded answer to your short question, I'll say two more things. Tools and infrastructure is important, and also setting expectations is important. Tools and infrastructure is, you build AI models, they're containerized, let's say microservices, you deploy them. What is your usage? How much load do you expect? How much to scale, right? Is it an on-prem? Is it a cloud-based service that's being deployed? What are the onboarding? That is, how do you set it up? How do you train it? How do you deploy it? And how much infrastructure is needed? How many servers, nodes, pods? What is the configuration like? What is the how do you collect the payload data? That is the data that's coming in when somebody is using this AI model. How do you save it? How do you make sure that the compliance and data privacy requirements are met with all the data that you're collecting? These are all part of the tools and infrastructure that one has to have a plan and processes for. And finally, setting expectations with end users, right? The end users being not necessarily the companies that are deploying these AI models, it's their end users, right? Who will be using it? Let's say in this particular case, the people who are actually ordering these fast food at fast food centers, they need to also know that the order taker is a new automated speech to text system, and that they have to be a little bit patient with it. Sometimes it may get it wrong, and so setting their expectations is important, and also setting the expectations for the company who is purchasing this, like let's say the fast food company itself. Setting those expectations are important. So I would say, in response to your question, these are all factors, right? Clarity of purpose, time to value, data strategy, skills strategy, tools and infrastructure, and the last one was setting expectations. These are all things that are very important to really deploying and getting value out of AI models.
Wow, thank you very much. That's a very detailed answer and really puts it into clarity. And I love that you used a real a case study example with this fast food chain, puts it into perspective, seeing all this rather than just abstract concepts. It's actually, I could feel how all this would be applied. Boston Consulting Group came out with a report in October saying that from 2018 to 2020, in 2018, about 40% of enterprises had an AI strategy. In 2020, it's now 60% of enterprises have an AI strategy. So it's growing, which is good, which is exciting. However, at the same time, only 10% of enterprises see significant financial returns on their AI investments. Why would you say that is the case? And where are the pitfalls that you're seeing that companies usually trip up on when deploying AI?
Yeah, some of the things that I mentioned in the journey to AI apply to this question as well. Some of it is, first of all, not understanding what AI can or cannot do. There may be hyped up expectations about what AI can deliver, and when you actually deploy AI models, you realize that there is more hype than reality, and therefore you feel disappointed. That could be one thing that could be playing role. Another thing is, all the things, companies and enterprises have this significant need to have AI that is explainable, that is trustworthy, and that is more transparent, right? Of course, secure and all of the other things. So the early, I would say, instantiations of AI models were, many vendors had their AI services. People started using them. People started experimenting with them. But then when you actually have to build it in real world enterprise grade, enterprise scale solutions and fit them into your business processes, you have to have all of these things. It should be trustworthy. The platform should be robust and should be able to platform and the AI models, they have to be able to explain what predictions they are making and why. Because in many domains, there is a lot of audit. And one of the examples here I would like to give is the insurance domain, right? Where, let's say you built an AI model to assist in loan approval, right? Insurance domain is something that is highly regulated and has a lot of oversight, right? If there is an AI model that is making predictions saying, this person's loan is approved, this person's loan is rejected, and you cannot explain why, even when there is an audit or when the borrower is disputing it, then it's a problem, right? If it is, let's say, unfairly biased on certain attributes like race, gender, age, and those sort of things, it's there is liability associated with it. So part of, one of the reasons after the initial exploration, companies sort of backed out or said, wait a minute, my explorations are fine, but I really cannot deploy this because the system doesn't explain what it's doing. It's unfairly biased. It is a black box system. I don't know if I can trust it. I can't deploy it, right? So in fact, some of the surveys that were done later on, I don't have the exact numbers, but most companies said, for what is one of the main concerns or one of the main factors that they care about when they deploy AI is trust and explainability. So coming back to, why haven't companies been able to really derive value is that the platforms and the solutions that AI vendors are offering have to be able to support these things, that they have to be able to explain, they have to be able to be transparent, show how it arrived at the prediction, with what variables have influenced it to the extent that it can, and provide and have different capabilities to debias, to show how it's making predictions, the explainability and all that. So, and it took a while for companies and vendors to build these capabilities, right? The transparency with the data and transparency with models and all that. So now I would say, after the initial hype, we're getting to a point where we have, somewhat more mature AI platforms that are able to offer these capabilities. So for example, IBM, I'll give IBM example. We have a product called OpenScale that allows one to bring in your own AI model wherever you have built it, and you can test it, the bias, the unfair bias for that model on specific factors, specific attributes, and see if the model is behaving fairly or unfairly. And if it is behaving unfairly, you have access to algorithms in the platform that allow you to debias and change the models and deploy them again, and monitor what it's doing and so on. So there are many of these factors that enterprises then realized that unless all these things are in place, I can't really trust this AI model and I can't really put it in production. And I'll give you one other example, an interesting project that I worked on. You say you got a lot of data in English, social media data, speech data, and all that, and built all these models that understand English speech to text, that understand English text, and can do natural language understanding and all that. And you go to a company and say, a global, let's say financial services company, and say, here I have all of these foundational AI services, and we've built an AI solution, a chatbot system. You can deploy it in your environment. The client would go, great, all right, but all my customers speak, 15 different languages. Our customers in the US and the UK speak English, but their accents are also different. And Australia speak English, but their accents are different. Our customers in Spain we want to deploy this in Spain too. Does your system speak Spanish? Oh, by the way, we have operations in Latin America, but the Spain Spanish is different from Mexican Spanish, which is different from Argentinian, and so on. Does it speak all these different Spanish varieties and dialects? Don't. So now you're, when you say AI for enterprises and scale, AI has to understand all of these languages as well, and natural language understanding, natural speech to text, all these models have to be trained and available in all these languages, and also the language of the industry, financial services domain, insurance domain language, and so on. Like in the case of fast food center, I said it has to understand the menus and the ingredients and so on. These are all things that need to be ready for AI to be enterprise ready. So we are on a journey as industry, I would say. We have to build all of these things, and the platforms have to be mature enough to support all of these kind of requirements for companies. And the skills within companies who are consuming these AI models have to come together, and they may have to be reskilled in some ways, and a little bit with an understanding of AI and how to manage these models. When all of these things happen, that's when companies are ready to really derive value from it, right? We have to prep the whole pipeline with all of these. We need tools for preparing the data. We need tools for managing these models. We need tools to tell us whether a model is fair or not, and if unfair, how to fix it. We need tools to help us understand how many prediction mistakes it's making, and what are the errors, and how do we fix it, and so on. A lot of factors have to come together, and the platforms have to get mature. And it's only now that the platforms are kind of capturing these level of concerns for managing the AI models. And once they are mature enough, which they are starting to become now, companies will start to really benefit. And I'm not saying that by saying so that we have to wait until they become mature. Obviously, in some cases, in certain use cases and scenarios, you can just go ahead and start deploying AI-based solutions. Chatbots were the first wave, I would say, used by companies specifically to see how most frequently asked questions can be addressed by these chatbots as opposed to humans doing it. And there has been a fair bit of first wave of success, second wave of successes, stories in that area, and now companies are starting to move into other business processes where they're starting to look at AI. So, for example, I said AI in IT operations management. It's becoming pretty prevalent, where outages and incidents and issues are automatically detected and addressed by automated AI systems. And similarly, in security management and in other domains, it's starting to make its way.
Mm-hmm. Makes me think of the Gartner hype cycle, where it feels like, from what you're saying, that AI has gone through that peak of the hype part, then down to the trough of disillusionment, and slowly we're getting out into this plateau of productivity, where, as you say, the whole industry is maturing and we understand what we need, the different tools we need, and how AI will go forward. And with that, I have a question. What does the future look like to you? How soon will we get to a stage where more and more companies are able to deploy AI effectively? and comfortably? And what next?
Well, as I said, in some domains already it is proving its value. It's already there. If you narrow the problem scope, not try to solve general purpose AI, but do narrow AI for specific industries, specific use cases, then you can actually get the accuracies up to a level where it's acceptable, and you can also, in specific domains address, all the rest of the things that I mentioned, such as, the fairness, transparency, explainability, robustness, the continuous learning aspects of the models and accuracy and all these things, right? In some domains it's already there. In some other domains it is making its way. But as I said, the first point I want to make here is that if you narrow the domain, we can have a lot more success. And wherever companies have narrowed it and applied it there, they have had good success. So specifically, for automating things, AI is being used. For optimizing things, AI is being used. For offering decision support, AI is being used. Then where would it go next, right? There is a lot of applicability to augmenting human intelligence right now. And we could say some of these things that we talked about are going in that direction. Then personalization and natural interfaces are the next wave, I would say. When I say personalization, what I mean is you can do all things related to automation, optimization, and all those things, but you want to get to a point where the services that are being offered to you are very special purpose for your cases, for your scenario. When you are interacting with a chatbot, the chatbot really understands your current situation, right? Let's say you just missed your flight, and it's connected to your calendar system, and it understands your preferences, automatically finds out all the rest of the reservations that can be made for you, and gives you a full travel plan, an alternate travel plan for you right off the bat. And you don't have to go look for these alternatives. Should I go change the hotel now, or should I change the car reservation now? That's a personalization example, right? So there is a lot of scope there in personalization, and there is also a lot of scope for providing natural interfaces to AI systems. So for example, right now we are still using dashboards and web pages and tools for interacting with the predictions and the recommendations that AI system is making. If our speech to text and they're already there almost, but they're all very mature, and they're all integrated into these specific use case scenarios. You could imagine even in business settings, just the way we are asking Siri and Google now, questions, we don't have to type them in. We should be able to say, hey, show me my sales reports for this month, and show me how it compares with the sales for last year around the same time, or show me how many incidents did I have in my IT environment in the past 1 month, and compare that with the incidents that I have had in the month before, right? I can give these kind of questions, just speak it out into AI system, and it should be able to understand, translate, form the right kind of queries, do the right kind of predictions, join all the information and give it to me, right? So that is the, at least I would like to think as one wave of what's next for AI. In general, if we look at what's happening in the industry, there is a lot of trend for automation and decision support, optimization. These are all things that are, pretty much now possible, from siloed systems to more integrated. From only structured data analysis, we go to more structured and unstructured data analysis. And from very discrete human and AI handoffs, we can now go to more to natural human and AI collaboration, more human-led and maybe AI guided type of scenarios. We can envision going into more AI-led and human-guided type of scenarios. And again, wherever applicable, I'm not saying that in all cases AI has to lead, human guides it, or human leads and AI can guide it. It really depends on the situation and so on. But since the question is more about where is AI headed, I would like to think that while we are continuing to optimize on scenarios such as automation, optimization, decision support, and so on, we can start to look forward to this next wave of enterprise products and solutions where there's a lot more personalization and a lot more natural interactions with AI systems.
Wow, thank you. Fantastic answer. And we're already running out of time. I can't believe how fast this hour has gone by, but I definitely enjoyed and learned a lot. Thank you, Rama. Where can our listeners find you and follow you to learn more about how your career develops and things that you work on?
I'm on LinkedIn. People can follow me on LinkedIn. I write blog posts from time to time on things that I'm working on. I'm more on LinkedIn than on Twitter, but I am on Twitter as well. So those would be the two places to find me.
Fantastic. That's very cool. And what is one book that you can recommend to our listeners?
Okay, so I actually would recommend maybe two.
That's okay. That's okay.
One is I will connect it to AI. I'll tell you one book that I've read recently called Bad Blood. It's on the company Theranos, written by John Carreyrou, Wall Street Journal investigative journalist. It's more about how this super smart lady, Elizabeth Holmes, with a lot of ambition, started this company Theranos, and which is mainly meant to be able to detect many kinds of diseases and symptoms and such from your blood, but with just 1 or 2 droplets of blood instead of taking vials of blood and all that. And it's a real story. And cut to chase, she is now being prosecuted because there were a lot of claims that she made about the company that were not quite true. Anyway, it was a very interesting read. And why do I talk about that book in the context of AI? What the takeaway from me from that is that when you are in the field of science, and I'm not necessarily saying that was AI alone per se, there was a lot of diagnostics and all of that in that particular real story. It being integrity and truthfulness about where your technology is super important. If you're too far ahead and in your vision, and you sold your vision, the reality hasn't met up, but you're still kind of bridging that gap in your mind, either to deceive for the purposes of deceiving or for the purposes that you believe that it will get there. Therefore, you're still going to sell your vision as the reality. That is when things start to really fall apart, right? So one thing that was a real interesting learning for me from that book is that how important it is to be honest, truthful, and state it as it is. So if an AI system or an AI model, for example, I'll bring it back to AI, is only going to go so far, and that is the current state, not that it cannot go far enough further in the future, but if that is where it is, I think setting those expectations with customers, being truthful and honest, is a lot more important than selling on a vision that may or may not be achievable. And part of every hype, you talked about Gartner's hype cycle, part of what happens in the industry is we tend to get ahead of what is possible. I mean, the vision level, it's important. It's good to have that vision. But when you actually sell, it's really what is available and what is the art of the possible. So anyway, that book is an interesting lesson learned for all scientists on how to be truthful and honest about the state of their work. The other one is an interesting one around, it's called Code Zero. I'll bring up the name of the author. There are multiple books with that same title. Just give me a moment. Mark Ellsberg. So this one is an interesting one. It's a fictional story about how personalized AI can go so far into intruding your lives, where it can start to give you suggestions on how to change yourself to be a good date when you go on a date, what to say to this person to have a nice conversation. That may be against your own personality, but it slowly starts to manipulate you to a point that you're no longer yourself. You're just listening to the AI system that is just giving you suggestions, and you're just taking it, and you're now becoming somebody else that you're not. And the dangers of getting into that, and how come this fictional company is a social media company, starts to go down that slippery path of manipulating people based on their data. In some cases, knowing clearly that they're exceeding all the moral lines and all that. So that was it's a racy thriller kind of a story, but it brought up a lot of interesting questions. And I know you asked for books. One other thing I would recommend is this Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma. Yeah, that was also an interesting one that brought up a lot of ethical questions around recommenders and personalization and those sort of things.
Well, I totally love that documentary. What do you think? Do you think we will find a way to get the benefits of AI, but at the same time stay ethical? Like, what is your feel after this movie? Do we have a chance?
Yeah, in fact, interestingly, actually, some of us, I'm part of I'm co-chair for an AI consortium, AI council at this industry consortium called CompTIA. And I posted this link on my LinkedIn page. A few of my colleagues who work at CompTIA as part of this AI council, who all work for different companies, we are part of that, writing best practices for building AI models. Actually, many of the things that I talked about today are going to be coming up as white papers and such. So we actually had an afternoon chat about that social media documentary. So coming back to you answering your question, there is no, I don't think I can give any better answer than you or anybody else, right? It's as a human society, we have to find a way to stay true to ourselves and not be manipulated by these AI systems. But it's so hard because we've built this web of all these different social media tools and apps that are offering so many conveniences to us, and at the same time, as part of those conveniences, sneaking in so many things that are totally taking us in a different direction and draining our time and emotional and energy and all that. As adults, we are struggling. Imagine what teenagers and kids in their early adolescence phase are going through. It's mind-boggling. And I think one concrete suggestion that came out that kind of jumped at me when I watched that documentary was one suggestion that one of the researchers who was being interviewed gave, which said, if it is a pull, that is, you are asking a question, that's a genuine one. It's originated from you. You have some need and you're asking Google or any kind of search engine or any kind of tool for information. But when it starts recommending things for you, that's the push from their side. You watch for it very carefully as to whether you want to consume it or not, because that suddenly starts to take you in. You're not driving your agenda, they're driving their agenda to you. So that's one takeaway that I said, that I don't have an answer to your question. I mean, we as humans have to find a way to keep our sanity and our focus, right? Especially these tools, social media tools, are really there to offer so many conveniences and useful tools, at the same time take away your focus from number of things that we should be doing in our day. We have to find a balance, and it's not that easy, especially with the kind of dopamine kicks that they keep giving. So being conscious of pull versus push, whose agenda are you serving? Just being very aware of it all the time whenever we consume it, I think is the only way that we can drive our agenda as opposed to getting carried away by somebody else's agenda.
Yeah, yeah. And as you say, even as adults, it's hard to be like aware and conscious of these things, and children, and like I feel I think they mentioned this in the movie as well, that legislation has a place.
Yes,
but it feels like
absolutely.
legislation is not keeping up.
It's not
like,
catching up. Yeah, I mean, I think the legislators all around the world, actually in all countries, are far behind in catching up to how fast these technologies are emerging and how many different facets there are to them that influence our lives and livelihood and so many other aspects. So there is legislation definitely has a role to play, absolutely. And similarly, self-control of individuals at an individual level also has a big role to play, which is much harder. No matter how much legislators legislate, in the end, it all comes down to your individual discipline. And that is so hard. And, also the education system is also lagging behind. Schools and colleges, universities also have to teach the ethics, the etiquettes around using social media. Especially in these times when we are going through a pandemic, and most students around the world are just learning through online media forums. There's so much on computers, on different online courses, not interacting physically with colleagues, friends. Access to everything right there with a click, and you're listening to your teacher. You could be looking like you're looking into your Zoom session. You could be pulling up another browser, watching something, reading something. Any number of things could happen. Distractions are galore, right? How universities, and especially schools, middle schools and elementary schools and high schools, also have to catch up a lot to teach the etiquettes and the morals around self-discipline and control. Otherwise, we will become a generation and a society of people who are just in it for the dopamine kicks, and we lose our ability to focus for longer stretches and to do the kind of deep thinking that many scientists in our previous generations were able to do and invent such important things, because they were able to take one idea, one thought, and sit on it for whatever time it took to come up with it, right? It requires that solitude, that time to think. Anytime we are in it for 15-20 minutes max and say, oh, time for a dopamine kick, let's go read this news article, let's go do that, right? We all go through those distractions, and more so for children. Yeah, I don't want to end our conversation on a panicky note, so let's bring it back to something more positive, on the positive side, right? We are all so connected, information is accessible so much, and we get to know things and can communicate with our family, friends at any time of the day. So there are a lot of good things too. So we just have to find the right balance and navigate it carefully.
Yeah. Like, be the master of technology, not the other way around.
Exactly.
Awesome. Rama, thank you so much. It was a very interesting discussion. I'm very happy that you joined us on this show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on your show, Kirill.
So there you have it, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Rama Akkiraju as much as I did and got valuable insights. My favorite part of the episode was what Rama mentioned about clarity of purpose. Super important, and also the way she described it made it super clear that the AI, the company that's developing the AI, the company that is consuming the AI, they both need to have clarity of purpose and also time to value, understand the time to value in order to get this value out of the artificial intelligence effectively and actually get the value in the first place. So very interesting, that example with the natural language processing and speech to text recognition, and how, depending on the industry, depending on the application, it will be used differently, or will have different purpose for different industries, different companies. That was my favorite takeaway. I'm sure you have yours. There's lots of great insights. As usual, you can find the show notes for this episode at superdatascience.com/425. That's superdatascience.com/425. There you will find the transcript for this episode, any materials and books that were mentioned on the podcast, as well as the URL to Rama's LinkedIn and Twitter, where you can connect with her and follow her in her career. If you enjoyed this episode and you know somebody who would benefit from understanding better how AI has matured over the years and how enterprises can apply artificial intelligence to more success, then send them this episode. Very easy to share. Just send them the link, superdatascience.com/425, and they'll be able to access both the audio and video and choose what they would prefer to listen to or watch. And on that note, thank you so much for being here today. I look forward to seeing you back here next time. Until then, happy analyzing.